like you said, every roster is not going to be the same. And it is a very fluid thing because you're trying to get the guys that you have in your program to play their best basketball. And that best basketball is to a standard that you set as a coach. So I think that's a really good way to define success. And now if you're going to be successful and you get to pick 5 NBA players, coach, who are you taking for your starting 5?
Now I'm going to assume I can pick some guys that have retired, right?
Past or present.
Okay. And I'm admittedly not an NBA junkie. Like I watch a fair share of NBA, but the last few years, not as much. This team that I'm going to give you is not – I'm not convinced they could function together. Okay. But just hypothetically speaking, it starts with Allen Iverson, man. I'd never watched more NBA than when he was in his prime. Like probably my middle school to early high school years or whenever that was, early 2000s, late 90s. Like that's AI was my guy. I had every jersey. I had the alternate blue jersey. I actually just bought a red AI jersey probably 2 years ago, which is a little embarrassing for a 28-year-old man at the time to spend money on. But everything starts with Allen Iverson. I'm going to put Michael Jordan, obviously, LeBron James. I'm not talking about who's better right now. That's not what this is for. Kevin Durant, Kobe Bryant. That team could not function. They
very
could not
positionless.
Yeah, positionless basketball. There you go.
And now the question would be, now are you going to get the long shorts for your team that Allen Iverson wore when he played, or are you going to get the short shorts or just the tights that LeBron works out on Instagram? That's something you'd have to wrestle with there as a coach.
Maybe some custom jerseys right there, whatever they wanted to wear.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Now, you talked about some of the guys that you've worked for, which are some of the people that you've learned from, some great head coaches. Who have you learned from? And you may already have mentioned them, you may re-mention them, but I just want to ask you this. Who have you learned from that you think other coaches should learn from?
I would be remiss if I didn't start with those guys, and I know, some of you may know them, some of you may not, but my high school coach, Dan Malik, I mean, he was phenomenal. And as a high school kid, I knew he was a good coach, but you don't realize how good a coach someone is until you start coaching yourself and working for other good coaches. And he really got me into it in the first place. But Dan Malik was great. Bill Hurd, he's an assistant coach at Gretna High School now. Paul Sather at North Dakota, phenomenal motion coach. And if you want to talk culture and how to run a program, he's your guy. Darren Hansen at UNO, worked with James Miller. He's at New Mexico State University. Just some guys that have really shaped my career. Randall Herbst at Green Bay, just guys that have really helped me along, and I've learned a lot from those guys. But as far as just like other resources, I'm going to butcher this guy's name, okay? But Ryan Pannoni,
Yep.
Is that how you say it?
Yep, I follow him on Twitter. He puts out great stuff.
I'm an X's and O's junkie, and I love the offensive side of the game, which is probably why we were a terrible defensive team this year. But anyway, Ryan Pannoni and then a guy named Zach Boisvert. He's an assistant at Army, I believe. Those guys put a ton of offensive concepts in. They'll clip up film a lot of the best actions that they saw in the 2014 NCAA tournament, or the best out-of-bounds plays against zone that they saw in the 2019 NBA playoffs, things like that. And I just eat that up. So I follow those guys, and I should probably reach out to them and let them know I've stolen all their stuff. So I would say those two are like social media type guys that have influenced me. And then there's 3 guys or a couple guys that, as far as culture and your program go, that have really shaped how I do things. And one of them is Bob Walsh. He's on the staff at Providence. He was a former Division III and Division I head coach, and he's on Twitter a lot, and he's pretty active, and he puts a lot of really good stuff out there about how to run your team and your program. And then Don Meyer, I spent a year and a half at Northern State, and he was still up there around the program when I was fortunate enough to be a GA there. And I took a ton of his handouts, and I have binders full of his stuff, and just phenomenal ways to live your own life and to help your team and your players live theirs. And then John Gordon, I think John Gordon, a lot of people read his books like The Energy Bus, and he has a podcast called Positive U, I think, or Positive University, and he's had some phenomenal interviews on there with Tony Bennett and recently with PJ Fleck. And I don't know. I mean, I just listed a bunch of guys, but I try to learn from as many people as I possibly can.
And there's a lot of information out there, a lot of people to learn from. And like I was just having a conversation the other day, if you can just take one thing, if I'm someone listening and if I look up one of these individuals that you just mentioned, if you can just take one thing, you're going to become a better coach and a better individual. And I think that's one thing. Sometimes it's easy to get overwhelmed with all of the information that's out there. But when you're just trying to get better as a coach and trying to get better as an individual, just take one thing. Don't complicate it. One thing here, one thing there. After a year, you're going to be pretty darn good coach or whatever it is that you're doing. Now, you mentioned the podcast by John Gordon, but another question that I have for you that I think you can maybe provide some good information to anybody listening. What 2 or 3 books or podcasts have been monumental in your development as a coach?
Yeah, so definitely that Positive View. I would encourage people to look that up with John Gordon. He does a lot of interviews with coaches, so I think anyone who's coaching it or any type of leadership, that'd be really good. But I actually I got a couple books here. That one of them, I'm a big Coach Cal guy, and I'm not all the way through this yet, but it's called Success is the Only Option: The Art of Coaching Extreme Talent. And I don't have extreme talent on my team, coach, but I think that title's a little misleading because that goes to really anybody that you coach, and it's a really good book about how to get the most out of them while also helping them reach their individual goals. Because we all know at Kentucky, those guys want to go to the NBA. So it's a really good mix on how do you create a team while also helping guys reach individual goals, which some people say that's not possible. But it's a really good book as far as that goes. And then this is the one that I read recently and I loved it. It's by Seth Davis.
Great
it's
book.
Called Getting to Us. And he followed, I think it was 8 coaches, all basketball or football coaches around, like Brad Stevens, Coach K, Urban Meyer. And there's probably anywhere from 20 to 40 pages in that book devoted to each coach and just what makes them tick and what makes them as good as they are. And what are some things that they've struggled with. But more importantly, it talks about how they get all their teams to us. Like, how do you make it a team from individuals to us as a group, and how to be successful. So those are 2 books that I've read recently that I would recommend.
Last question for you, and I'm sure there's a lot of things, but if you could narrow it down, what's 1 or 2 things that you learned in your first year of being a head coach that you wish you would have known before you started?
So the first, I would say, the amount of decisions that you have to make on a daily basis, and a lot of them you probably don't care about, but you're the boss now, and people need to know what to do. And I just wasn't really ready for the amount of decisions I had to make. It wasn't suggestions anymore. And I heard that before I became a head coach. Like, you're not making suggestions now, you're making decisions. But I was a little bit surprised at just how many things would come across your desk that, you don't really even care about, but you kind of have to care, because if you don't put any thought into that decision, what you say goes. So if you just say something and you don't mean it, and then it happens that way, that's your own fault. So just the amount of decisions that you have to make was a little bit eye-opening. And then I think the most important thing is you need good help around you. And that's been it's a challenge when you only have a part-time assistant, but you can't do it all on your own. And by nature, I'm a control freak, and I am type A to the max, and I think I can do it all on my own, but I can't, and nobody can. So I think being able to delegate a little more, but before you do that, you got to have some good help around you. And just how comforting it would be to have like some full-time help that can do a really good job for you. Because if you try to do it all on your own, you're going to get burnt out. And even if you don't get burnt out, you're not going to make the best decisions or be the best coach you can be for your team.
I really enjoyed this conversation, Coach. I appreciate you coming on, and I know, anybody who tunes in is going to learn something. I know I learned some things, some great quotes, and just some great examples and stories from you about your journey and where you are now and how you got there. So, thanks a lot for coming on. We appreciate